I heard something. Hello. This is the Liberty Hour podcast. Give us a call if you care to participate. 312-642-5600. So last week, I was in South Florida. As you know, the people who listen to the podcast and the show, I'm a real estate broker, and I sell property in a state where I feel comfortable acting as a fiduciary, which means I can't really, in good confidence, sell you Illinois property because Illinois is a disaster. It is run by frauds and failures with the undercurrent of the political mafia we call the Chicago, Illinois Democrat Party. So I had to decide, do I want to violate my belief of what a fiduciary is to a client and just churn and burn like so many housewives with their Lee press-on nails and their white Jaguars tooling around talking about foyers? Or do I want to give true and honest advice on where to invest your hard-earned money, where the benefit and value is? So 3.5 years ago, much to the chagrin of my lovely wife, who has dealt with me for more years than most would, I decided that, look, if we're going to continue to make money to offset our losses, I'm going to have to do it in Florida. So from time to time, I will go to Florida and try to earn a living, because I don't have one of these mystical, magical unicorn pensions where I sit around and I act as a campaign manager or a district thug for Mike Madigan, which, by the way, I'm sure you listened to the morning show today, which is the 11th of December, when Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson told you what happens when you dare run against the Madigan machine. Even when you're a 19-year-old kid from the 13th Ward, who grew up in the 13th Ward, who went to Fenwick, who was going to DePaul, who, for all intents and purposes, has nothing but good intentions to represent his ward and to kind of go against the corruption we all know is there. I mean, are we even pretending anymore that organized crime has not redeveloped itself into the Democrat Party of Illinois? Or is that still, maybe I'll get a pension if I shut up, if I pull the lever for whoever Mike Madigan and the cohorts say, maybe I'll get something, that pothole will get fixed. Because as you see, they have no shame. They're not men. They threaten 19-year-old children who want to do the best they can, who want to expand, who believe in our system, our political system, who think that it works, that Chicago politics and society works the way it did in their textbooks. The naivete, the wide-eyed, real ignorance of our kids today, that we tell them how things are supposed to work and we paint a pretty picture of what America is. But here in Chicago, we sit back as organized crime takes over, and we pretend there's infrastructure spending, and we pretend there's representation instead of extortion. And what you see on Chicago News last night, and what you'll see until this kid drops out or loses because the game is rigged to keep the fraud going, what you see is just complacency by citizens. And that's who's to blame now. All of you lowlifes in the 13th Ward who vote for Mike Madigan and whoever he tells you to. You're the scumbag. So, see, I think we should get away from you now. I'm tired of funding you, tired of offsetting your crime. So I sell real estate in South Florida. How's that for a sales pitch for your company? Probably not going to go good for the one here. That's all right, because last week I just basically said, you know what, my board here, you're my secondary board. From now on, it is going to be Florida. That's where I'm going to concentrate on, because one thing that the J.B. Pritzker election shows you is that the future is bleak at best. Unless you're in on the scam. Then happy days are here again. It's blue skies if you're in on the scam. If you own one of these politicians like the Godfather, so many walnuts in his pocket or quarters in his pocket, then you're going to be fine. In fact, you're going to make more than you ever thought you'd make before. So that is why I missed last Tuesday and Wednesday of the podcast. I'm going to be here today and tomorrow. But if I can put a deal together, I'll probably have to go back soon. See, because that's how it works in the real world. In the real world, you got to work, you got to produce, you got to perform. You got to put effort forward. You got to move on. And if you're struggling, you better figure it out, because the reality is there's nobody to lean on in the real world, but not in the political world. Not in the world of politics as we know it. And certainly not in government, in the American government, which has really done something that I don't think any foreign country could have done. And that is to break and enslave the American citizen. Now, how did they do it? They did it through debt. They did it through debt, and that's something that we really don't talk about much anymore. They do it through spending. They do it through promises of utopia. And the nice thing is this is bipartisan. Now, behind the scenes a little bit, a podcast is different than a radio show. And it's a little more difficult. And I went after a congressman to kind of interview him, a congressman who has recently lost here in Illinois. And we'll see if we can get in touch with him. To interview him and to ask him, during the last year, something very sneaky happened. Something very, very underhanded happened. And it happened not because Democrats, like they do normally here in Chicago, where you threaten kids who run against you. But what happened was it was a bureaucracy bundling of the debt ceiling increase to spending for military. And it was in conjunction with Nancy Pelosi. Most of you will remember it because if you're listening to the show, you're hyper informed. It was a deal cut back in March with Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, doll hair. And it was in the Oval Office, and they were celebrating. And what they did is they said, look, we'll fund all the military spending you want because, we don't want the people to know about all the wars we're in or the amount of money we're wasting and spending to back up the Saudis and make sure that their oil cartel stays intact. So what we're going to do is we're going to tie that with welfare spending. And then what we'll do to keep your party quiet, the Republicans, we're going to eliminate the debt ceiling talks December 8th. Because I had inadvertently said during a podcast, knowing historically December 8th has always been a big day because that's when if you hit the debt ceiling, which, by the way, we never don't do, we always just continue to increase that spending. December 8th is the day come a reckoning. That's when you got to see who's who, right? Even if it's phony rhetoric, which, by the way, I found some. My mouse isn't working. Oh, here we go. That I thought you'd like.
And since the beginning, the majority leader and myself, along...
All right, let me reset that. So what was nice about Barack Obama, and I always say this, is that it for a moment, for a stitch in time, it brought conservatives together. And it brought people together who were very upset with the way things had been running under Bush, with the TARP bailouts, with the payoffs to the very scum that created the crisis, the financial crisis, the investment banks in Wall Street. See, you can be a conservative and recognize that corporatist fraud, TARP, for what it is, and not be one of these socialists who are on Wall Street with a mask over your face. You can do both because we can think. We're conservatives. We're supposed to be able to articulate our position. We're supposed to understand what capitalism versus corporatism versus creditism. We're supposed to get all this. And we did for just that brief stitch in time from the minute, a little bit before, but the minute after Barack Obama was elected, all the way through. And that's when we had conservatives that you said, man, listen to this guy. It sounds like he's been smoking Marlboros in a tavern, falling off of a stool, but man, oh man, does he sound conservative. And that was John Boehner. So this is John Boehner during the really the beginning and the midst of the Tea Party strength. And I want you to hear what Republicans stood for back then.
And since the beginning, the majority leader and myself, along with Senator McConnell and Senator Kyle, have been clear. Tax hikes are off the table. First of all, raising taxes is going to destroy jobs. And if you raise taxes on the people that we need to grow our economy and to hire new workers, guess what? They're not going to do it if they have to pay higher taxes to the federal government. Second, a tax hike cannot pass the U.S. House of Representatives. It's not just a bad idea, it doesn't have the votes, and it can't happen. And third, the American people don't want us to raise taxes. They know that we've got a spending problem. That's why Republicans passed a budget that pays down debt over time without raising taxes. Now, we don't have any more time to waste. And I want to reiterate that we will not agree to the President's request to increase the debt limit without serious spending cuts and reforms to the way we spend the American people's money. As I said before, the spending cuts must be greater than any increase in the debt limit. And these have to be real spending cuts, no targets to push this question off to the long term, no more kicking the can down the road. And the reason for this is simple. A debt limit that fails this test will hurt the economy, impede job growth by intensifying the uncertainty.
Man, does that sound
about
amazing?
Our nation's ability to deal with our long-term fiscal problems. This is the moment, folks. The fight isn't about numbers, it's about jobs. It's about the future of our country. And we've got a chance to do something big. We have that chance to do it now. And for the sake of our economy, the sake for the future of our kids and grandkids, this is a chance and an opportunity that we cannot afford to allow to pass.
That's $8 trillion ago. $8 trillion in admitted debt. Not the phony baloney spending we obligate ourselves to. They're called unfunded liabilities. We just ignore that, right? Republicans, conservatives, Trump Krishnas, just ignore it. That's off the table because what this guy's talking about, that sounds like a deal today. So let's just a quick recap. Tax hikes bad, spending bad, borrowing bad, debt ceiling important. In fact, this is when they were willing to shut the government down. You remember that? Now where's everybody? Now even in the, what do they call it, lame duck, which I think they all are lame ducks. And so do the pharmaceutical companies in Washington, D.C. that can't keep Viagra on the shelf. Lame duck session is in now, right? So the lame ducks, this is when they, if they wanted to, they could make this important so that the new coming socialists, the Soviet-style real Nazis that are coming in, called the social engineering Democrat socialists, they would have to deal with some of these issues. But what are our guys doing? Well, they're cleaning their offices out. In fact, we tried to get a hold of one. We don't even know who the hell works for them anymore. They're cleaning their offices out, which means they're trying to put a bow on their mistresses that they've been having for all the years that they just have to break up with to go back home to their wives. These scoundrels that they are. That it's Caligula, Washington, D.C. Jeez. And now, moreover, these real pillars of conservatism, these don't apply anymore. Because you know who told me so? The president's right-hand advisor.
Well, look, it's been a long 2 years for the chief, General Kelly. He ran Homeland Security and has been running the White House staff. I think, by the way, has been a very...
Right, hold on. That's the Kelly thing. We get him on Kelly. What he went on to say is that is not an issue. That's not a problem. Don't worry about it. This trade war that we win with China, that magic one where you're paying all the revenue to the government in hidden taxes, the fact that what you have happening now is that people are basically losing their businesses, losing the ramifications of tariffs are hitting, and nobody wants to talk about it. Let's see if we got the right clip here, kid.
Worries in the West Wing this morning. A source close to the president tells us he's concerned he could be impeached when Democrats take over the House. The source says the president even anxious. He is not certain, though, it will happen. A separate source says the White House aides believe collusion will not be the problem. The source says aides think the only issue that may stick is campaign finance violations stemming from those hush payments to alleged Trump mistresses.
You know what? I hit the CNN one for the morning show, not the one that I wanted to hit. So give me 1 second here. I'm sorry about that, ladies and gentlemen.
You and your family and all of your fellow Americans are now more than $21 trillion in debt. The U.S. passed that threshold last week, as we reported. Deirdre Bolton of the Fox Business Network tells us what all this means.
The U.S. government just hit a record, but not one with bragging rights. We are in debt, a lot of debt. The U.S. government spends much more than it takes in. During President Obama's tenure, the national debt nearly doubled. Democrats and Republicans agreed to government bailouts of numerous industries after the 2008 financial crisis. This past year, there were a dozen large-scale storms. Combined, the cost of responding and rebuilding was about $200 billion. While few citizens find fault with the reasoning, the money is still spent. Recently, President Trump asked for more money for defense, supporting the fight against ISIS and funding the Department of Veterans Affairs and other agencies. Some politicians say there is a limit to what the country can afford.
The greatest threat to our nation is we ourselves. It's our inability to deal with the fiscal issues that we as a nation have.
The Director of National Intelligence, Dan Coats, has said that Washington's lack of fiscal discipline undermines national security. President Trump is not worried about the national debt. Sources say he believes the American economy will grow and compensate for increased spending. In February, President Trump signed a law that suspends the debt ceiling, allowing the U.S. government to borrow as much as it needs to fund the activities approved by Congress until March of next year. Some economists say that the U.S. can increase its debt indefinitely, but then we would be in uncharted territory.
So I said March. I was off a month. I apologize. I did the research while I was on the plane, however. So this is the part where they say, we're not worried, we can grow our way out of it, which is why so much attention has been put forward on the market, when the reality is a market is not the reflection of success of an administration. Only under this president it is. And look, once again, I have to clarify, I'm not a never Trumper. He's done some great things, mainly in regulations, which I think are crucially important. So much for the judges, which the last one just sided with the liberals, but we'll talk about that tomorrow. But the reality is the fundamental principle that we cannot deny, that we continue to deny, is the fiscal shape of our country. The fact is, when you factor in unfunded liabilities, when you factor in mindless spending, a market is irrelevant. You can't keep up. If you fungiate the market, the success, and the debt, you're bankrupt. You're bankrupt. So you have to continue in the scam. You have to continue in the frauded GDP numbers, in government spending, so that it mirrors up as success of an economy. The reality is that doesn't work. We here in Illinois listening to this, you know this. It's why you flee. It's why businesses flee. It's why nothing opens up that isn't subsidized. That's what the future of the country looks like, unless we change the trajectory. Now, he's got 2 years left. Now, who's going to do it? You had the Republican Congressman. They couldn't do it, and they lied, and they hid the fact of the debt problem and the borrowing and the spending. They lied. Now, here comes the socialists. Now, you know what's going to quadruple? Here it is. You could pick the issues apart one by one, but what's the one common theme is that it's not long before you have the Macron speech you heard in France. It's not long before they're buying off civility with $100 a month in welfare payments. That's what's around the corner. And the tariff thing doesn't work. It's a lie. Nationalism, populism, whatever you want to call it, it's protectionist and it's a fraud. And what it does is it buoys up companies that can't compete. And who pays when you do that? Other industries, farmers, steel workers. Here you go.
This little piggy isn't going to market, at least not in China, nor any of his companions. Beijing slapped a 25% tariff on imports of pork from the US last month, and then another 25% 2 weeks ago. It means one of Terry O'Neill's main markets is now effectively closed to him.
It's going to be very difficult for us to even show any type of profit. We'll be definitely be in the red this year. So it's really disheartening for a farmer to see prices decrease. They're out of their control, which tariffs do.
America's farmers are collateral damage in the US trade war. China, Canada, Mexico, and the European Union have all targeted them in retaliation for Donald Trump's levy of tariffs on imported steel.
The imposition of tariffs means that each one of these piglets is already worth $18 less than it was before. This one farm alone expects to lose around $200,000 in revenue this year as a result. Now multiply that by the 60,000 pig farms across the United States, and you're talking about hundreds of millions of lost dollars. So Donald Trump is taking a big economic gamble with his trade war. He's taking a big political gamble as well.
Nebraska and other farming states are typically Republican and are strong supporters of the Trump presidency, at least for now.
If it comes fall and we're still $2 out of the money on all of our major commodities when we are already in trouble, then that support is going to erode as farmers go to their bankers and explain that they don't have enough money to pay their loans back.
And what did Trump do? He subsidized them, because the reality is that farmer was exactly correct. They were $2 out of the market, and we subsidized them, and we cooked the market. So on one hand, you fund the investment bankers to buy a product they wouldn't normally buy. There's a subsidy, welfare. On the other hand, you send direct payments to the farmers. See, now this is the ramifications of the noble lie that a government collective, a government orchestrated macroeconomy bodes well for the citizen. It doesn't. It doesn't. And this is why it is important for Republicans, for us, to get back to our fundamentals. Now, here's the nice thing about adversity. Here's the nice thing about what you see, what will happen, is that we will go back to that, especially once the Democrat Socialist Congress takes over. There will be a reformation of the Tea Party. But you've been hoisted by your own petard with Donald Trump. Because what he is practicing, unfortunately, and I do have hope that maybe he can see the reality, what he is practicing has ramifications and repercussions that are unintended consequences on the real people. And that has been my argument against tariffs since I learned about Smoot-Hawley. That is the argument. You cannot rewrite history without trying to steal the future, but moreover, without repeating the past. We are going to slip in, and you're seeing that now. Could you imagine a time when your parents were so tied into the market, that's how they judged politicians? Because for 2 years, that's all we've been taught. The economy's good. Look at the stock market. The stock market is a scam. The stock market is very easily frauded. Ironically, it's frauded by failure. It's frauded by the failure of tariffs, and it's frauded by the failure of Obamacare. Because one thing Obamacare did is it alleviated expenses from companies to take care of their employees and put it upon the society in general. So you had a populist pop. That's what the stock market is. It's a fraud. Barack Obama summed it up perfectly when he was selling Obamacare, which, by the way, he's back on the trail doing it again. He's back on the trail doing it again. So here's you and I, like taffy, being pulled to different directions. Now, we pretend it's right and left, but it isn't right and left. It's a circle that keeps repeating itself. And the only difference between Republicans and Democrats is who wants to be in control of the reins, who wants to have the wheel in their hand. That's what the difference is now. And this is something that I've been arguing since Trump was a candidate, since we heard the first populist. I liked a lot of what he did. And I think, by the way, a lot of what he did was fantastic. In particular with this green energy nonsense, this the agreement, the Paris Accord, in particular with trying to weaken these establishments, these bureaucrats, the EPA, OSHA, the regulatory Gestapos that we pretend have the nation's best interest at heart. They don't. They're incentivized to penalize companies. They get to keep half of the penalty. So you've pitted them against the citizen. But unfortunately, we're not focusing on what happens when we buy the lie. When you could like Donald Trump for those things. And the thing is, you can hope to push him and be pliable into the others. But you're not going to do it by not talking about it. So what I had to do to get that farmer clip, that's the BBC. Now, the BBC is a socialist. Ironically, they're running it from a capitalist point of view. But what they did that kind of snuck by, and this was last week, if you can believe it, they talked about how these ramifications of steel are having a big effect on small business in America.
Lots of activity behind me here in Winnsboro, South Carolina. It's the end of the working day. At this factory, you can see the employees making their way home. But for how much longer are they going to perform this daily ritual at this site? We talk about the global tariffs war and trade war in fairly abstract terms, in terms of dollar numbers and so on. But for the people here in this community, this trade war is starting to have very tangible outcomes.
At Element, we're proud to bring manufacturing back to America. And here in Winnsboro, South Carolina, it's a community effort.
But not for much longer. In October, Element Electronics plans to all but close, laying off 126 employees and maintaining just a skeleton staff. It can't afford to assemble TVs at this site because Donald Trump's tariffs have made imported Chinese components too expensive. Workers were told to stay tight-lipped. What do you think about it all?
It is what it is.
But the region's Chamber of Commerce was stunned by the decision.
We knew the tariffs were in place. We had no idea that Winnsboro, South Carolina, was going to feel the detrimental impact of that so quickly. It was a shock.
While US unemployment is at record lows, in this region, it's nearly double the national average.
That's very important, because what a tariff does is it subsidizes a failure, and it does it at the expense of a success. This is the issue. This was a successful company. This is a company that employed real people in a real town. And what you did is, by the tariffs, is you allowed a fake company in a garbage town that already chased out business like Illinois to all of a sudden reopen shuttered plants in the name of what? In the name of these people who were successful. This is what happens when you pick winners and losers. The losers are real people too. It isn't just some game like you're playing Risk on an L with Kramer. This is reality. And you took people who were thriving in an arena that was competitive, and you made it not competitive. It's like, I always laugh when I hear the guys talk Ford, Chevy, which pickup truck is better. How many of them know that since the 50s, there's been a 25% tariff on foreign trucks? So the reality is, your Ford and your Chevy, it sucks compared to the foreign truck. It can't compete with it. In fact, that's not me saying it. Some guy who just sees that what unions are, or sees what corporate failure is, or sees what bribery is, called campaign contributions. It's the companies themselves who demand that tariff in place. For if the company could really compete, things were really Ford tough, they wouldn't mind competing against Toyota. But they can't. So when you go buy that Toyota Tundra, that sucker pays 25% tax for freedom of choice. The things we're all guaranteed, allegedly. See, this is the archetype, the schematics of freedom were handed to us by people who understood them. We've bastardized those in the name of a phony patriotism. And that's how we now have to go back to, or figure out how to go back to. Now, how do you do it in a system that basically pays off politicians as political prostitutes, that we have endless money? Endless. And what we're arguing about, instead of the fundamentals and principles, is about the money and how much companies can pay off to keep this oppressive legal policy in place. These are extortion weapons. And instead of us fighting back, we bend knee. Now, I got Kevin McCarthy, and where is he? Kevin McCarthy on the Sunday show. Damn it, this is the problem when you try to mix places here. Hold on, I got to see him.
Everything they've laid out, I think, builds the case that there's nothing there. You've had to.
So Kevin McCarthy was on Sunday show, basically, and he's talking about the fact that the issue with politics is you need to make it more easy for companies to give more money. That the campaign reform that they want to implement isn't about limiting companies' ability to bribe politicians. It's about expanding it. So the problem is, you have the rule makers who are corrupted by the rules and use those rules as weapons and extortion tools against companies that want to be involved in business, so they don't have these tariffs put on them. So it's really a diabolical industry that feeds on its own failure. And in the meantime, we're the ones that are deceived. We are the ones that pay the cost. You and I. And then what happens is that every once in a while, they'll have the old guy who failed come out as the new guy who has the new idea. And I didn't think it would happen with Obama. I thought that we would recognize the fact that his presidency not only led to Donald Trump, but really led to the doubling of the national debt, to the doubling of the spending, to the doubling of the political payoffs and campaign corruption. But not true, because Barack just took a year off. He's back, baby. He's back, and he's selling the same socialism.
This was an extraordinary period. There was this presidential election going on. We had these two candidates, both running.
I got to tell you, that's Hank Paulson, by the way. That's a Republican. This is from HBO's new series, Axion. And this is a Republican talking about not only how Barack Obama got in office, but what he did once he in it. And he's talking about it from a fan base. He's not talking about it because he's opposed to it. He's talking about it because he knows that the Republicans would benefit from it, that we would adopt that spending. We would adopt that borrowing. Moreover, we we would massage that yoke of tyranny, Obamacare, to where it strapped, it worked exactly as Barack Obama wanted. And they would do it in the name of the citizen. And what they're talking about is the payoffs to special interests in Wall Street and how at the time they had to do that.
This was an extraordinary period. There was this presidential election going on. We had these two candidates, both running against President Bush because he was very unpopular.
I won't let banks and lenders off the hook when it was their greed and irresponsibility that partially got us into this mess. We should not be bailing out just Wall Street. We should be restoring opportunity on Main Street.
It was a bum deal for people. You got folks out there, teachers and construction workers and small business people, single moms, and they're working hard. They're acting responsibly. To the extent that they were involved in any of this, it's that some mortgage broker tells them they can afford a house that they don't know. It looks like they can afford it. And suddenly, folks are getting wiped out.
Hi, how are you? Good, what's your name?
And the problem you had, the dynamic you had at that juncture, is that the actions that are necessary to save the financial system are, by any definition, bad politics.
Thank you, man.
Are you listening to that? So they know going in that the actions that are necessary are bad politics. And the reason I'm playing this and rehashing this is what's coming in the future. This bailout to Wall Street, it's coming again. As you watch the market implode, it's imploding because it's built on lies and fake and fraud and credit. It's not based on real production. It's based on pick and choose policies that are adopted by both parties. And moreover, they know that what they're doing is against the rules, violates the trust, but it allows Barack Obama to run as a mitigator of right and wrong, as the virtuous. And when push comes to shove, what does he do? He rubber stamps the TARP payouts. Rubber stamps it. And he rubber stamps it to whom exactly? To the people who broke the system, but moreover, the people we're going to have to do it over and over and over. And this is the precedent. And this is the president. Donald Trump is running with the ball as well. Now, who's going to stop him? The Socialist Congress, who's telling you welfare for all? No, it's not. But I found this to be very, very incriminating. Very, very incriminating. And he goes on.
The fact that the American public hates what we did, is not surprising because in many ways it's un-American.
That's the Republican.
Everybody is making a fortune, and people outside of that area are paying for the money they're making. We're not going to have it.
The crisis awakens people to that sense that the game is rigged. This economy is not working for me.
This is a sick system from the inside. We have a lot of sickness in some of our institutions.
And in that kind of environment, if you've got irresponsible politicians who want to take advantage of that and start
like me
scapegoating people who don't look like you or start trafficking in conspiracy theories, there's going to be more of an audience for that.
Yeah, it's a real conspiracy.
And it tests our democracy in ways that are troubling.
It's not a conspiracy if it's right. It's just identifying the scam. Because what I wanted you to hear there is that Trump runs against it too. He runs against the sickness in a system and then implements more of a sickness, metastasizes it into protectionism. He's right, by the way. The system is sick. The system that would bail out the very frauds that broke it is a sick system. And a system that would subsidize the very frauds that continue the corruption through organized labor extortion unions that can't compete in a free market, that all of a sudden brings it back in the steel industry, in the aluminum industry, in the whatever tariff he wants industry. That's another kind, that's that sickness metastasizing. So we're not correcting it with Trump. We're just changing the symptoms. You're just shifting it. Okay, so you had tumors in your neck. Well, here you go. Now you got them under your armpits. But nonetheless, it's a lymphoma. And that's what government control collectivism is. It's a cancer that spreads and spreads and spreads until it overtakes the host. And how does it overtake the host? It overtakes him when the host stops fighting back. Who are you fighting back with? I'm just curious. So are we going to fight back with Trump's idea of government control over the economy versus Barack Obama versus whoever's next? And who is next? Is it going to be Adam Schiff? Can you do 2 more years of this buffoon? Claiming that what Trump did is wrong and what every Democrat congressman has done with your money by paying off sexual harassment claims quietly under the table isn't? See, and this is how you get pulled off into these personality fights. And ironically, I come to you and I more than just complain about it. I have no answer for it unless we understand we're not invested with these people. These people are merely politicians. And what nauseates is when you see that cult of personality become worshipped. And notice how we do that. It's not just Democrat socialists that do it. We do it. That's the main thing I want to communicate. I want to articulate. You can like a lot of who this Donald Trump is and a lot of what he does, but you don't have to sit idly by when you know, when you see, when you can reason, when you can decipher that it's simply a version of the same kind of failure. You don't have to sit idly by because you like it. Now, it's almost as if it plays into Donald Trump's hands. Because as you see these flawed, failure, real crooks who have been paying off their own sexual harassment allegations with the public money, claim that Donald Trump did something wrong by using his money to pay off mistresses, it immediately makes you tribal. It immediately makes you say, what are you kidding me? But that's not my issue. My issue is it's always about the control through property. See, ironically, that's what the country is based on. The individual property rights. The minute that the market is frauded, the minute that it's interjected, that it's controlled, that it's subsidized, it's fake. And you can't compete. And you get caught up in this false patriotism of nationalism. And here's my problem. It's sweeping the world now. See, instead of in France, what you see, instead of them rejecting socialism, they're actually calling for the conservative version of socialism called nationalism. That's what Donald Trump is promoting. Donald Trump is promoting the conservative version of Barack Obama's socialism, only we're calling it nationalism. And that's why I wanted you to see these clips. I wanted you to listen to the people who actually are harmed by winners chosen by government. Those winners are American steel, American car companies, American manufacturing that couldn't compete in the open market. Now, here's the other thing. They demonize these other countries for devaluing their dollar. What is a tariff? But devaluing your own dollar. That's why when the president came out the other day and said, I'm the tariff man, to me, that's it. Are you kidding me? Because what he's saying is, I'm the tax man. Tariff is a tax. Donald Trump declared himself to all conservatives, to everybody here, I'm the tax man. The only difference is I don't have the testicle fortitude to tax you like a Democrat and just say your taxes are going up. I'm going to tax your freedom. I'm going to tax your choice. I'm going to tax your liberty. And that's diabolical to me. That's as diabolical as Barack Obama coming out and telling you can keep your doctor, your rates will go down. It's the same freaking lie. I mean, I don't understand, but I'm optimistic in the opportunity this will create. Because I got news for you. I made a prediction with Dan Proft on the morning show 2 months back. I said the market's going to correct at least 20%. He laughed at me and bet cigars because I tighten the timeline, because you get carried away. You're on radio. And I knew it was going to happen, as everybody who understands what true economy versus rigged economy is. You can't tell this is a bubble, ladies and gentlemen. I'm curious. You can't look at this and say, gee, that market goes up all the time. I see empty stores in my neighborhood. My own personal economy isn't growing. In fact, my debt is. You can't see that the average American is living on credit card to credit card, hoping to merely hit some kind of big game to square up. That's what happens when you buy the lie. There is no noble lie. There's just a lie. That's all I want to communicate here. There is no noble lie. There's just a lie. And until you demand that the closest body to the people, Congress, do its actual job, Because the other argument is none of this is the president's job. And the new Congress got in and the old Congress goes out. And I really wanted to talk to that congressman because what I wanted to ask was, number one, you sat complacently by as we doubled and tripled our spending and debt. Number two, why didn't you fight for what the rules, for what the obligation, for what the responsibility of Congress is? Why didn't you fight for it? And if you could go back to before you were beat, would you do it? Would you recommend that the next Congress, the next Republican, do it? Or are you just going to fall into that lobbyist world of scumbags and continue to prostitute our political powers? And gee, what do you think the answer would be? What do you normally see? What do you normally see from politicians who get beat? They become lobbyists. And it's a system, a revolving door of fraud and lies and tyranny. So as Republicans, are we going to sit idly by as we watch? Just pick the lie. Which lie do you want? You want the lie that says he's on your team, that calls himself conservative, but governs like a socialist? Or you want the socialist who says he's a socialist, but governs like a communist? Which one do you want? Pick a team. And in the meantime, don't worry about that debt. Don't worry about the taxes. We're going to hide it. We're going to hide it, and we're going to steal the future from your grandkids. Because I love that clip about Boehner. It's always about the kids. It's always about the kids. Yet who do you harm? You harm the people here. You harm the people here tomorrow. You harm the people here in 100 years. The policies that are implemented today will be felt for decades, for generations. These aren't just some small company in North Carolina. Some guy was a success yesterday, a tariff hits, and he's a failure today. No. This is generations of the people that work there. This is what happens. The ripple of tyranny is a tsunami of abuse of future generations. And that's what you have to focus on. And that's what our job is as people who believe in liberty. That's what our job is to get that back into control. And you have to do it today. You have to do it now. You have to do it even if you don't like it. Because you know what? That's the only way you really get rid of politicians who are frauds, when you make them live up to their responsibility. So when you have Liza Minnelli, Mnuchin, and he's going to be the secretary. He's going to be the chief of staff. He's going to be the what are you talking? He's a third generation money bundling Democrat Goldman Sachs hack who was adopted by Trump. Red flag. When they parade Kudlow around and he tells you that that's not a big deal, we're going to grow out of it. Red flag. It's like the drug dealer telling you, I'll straighten out next week. No. You do it right now. And when you hear Lighthouser and Peter Navarro, Lighthouser is a Bob Dole attorney who's good for nothing. Never was an economist, didn't make a ton of money, that he wasn't corrupted, didn't know the outcome, inside trading, fraud. No. He's nothing, and he's in control of our tariff policy. Not to mention Peter Navarro, a third-rate teacher. Let's release Peter Navarro's financials. Everyone wants to do Trump's. Let's do Peter Navarro, the greatest influence on our foreign policy and trade negotiations. I mean, it's you have to start demanding the representation you were given. I started the show by talking about how the kid from Fenwick went on to think he could run against the Democrat corrupt machine here in Chicago. You know why? He read the books, the history books, and he thought that's how it worked. He thought that's what really would happen, that he would do what he wanted because he knew right answers. He wanted to represent the people. He wanted to fight for the freedom of the Illinoisan. How's that work in real life? Because we are the result of what happens when you turn a blind eye. We are the result of what happens when you run a pretend Republican, a fake conservative, and wrap your arms around him because he's a Republican. The whole time he's just in on the scam. Illinois is the example of why you have to reject Trumponomics. It doesn't work. It's a lie. Reject it. We will be back tomorrow. This is the Liberty Hour. I want to thank you for tuning in as always. We will be back same time tomorrow. Feel free to call next time. It's like, guys, I have to go outside and call, or one of you does. See you tomorrow.